Welcome to Auto Corner, and today we're going to do actually a full in-depth review of this beautiful CLS 55 AMG. I'm going to drive really badly, really horribly idiotic for no good reason. I hope you liked that stupid intro I did. I absolutely love this car. Now the car it is a CLS W219, which was launched back in 2004. And when it was launched, it was quite unique because what Mercedes thought was that they're going to use the coupe styling, but also having the practicality of a four-door sedan. So that's basically what they did, and they started this entire trend of the coupe four-door sedan, which is like the BMW 6 Series is today, the Audi A7, and I think there is a couple of more cars that actually did it. The Mercedes was not first with this theory. I mean, we have some Japanese car which actually did it back in 1990, but was not as big of an impact as this one did. When it was launched with a V6 engine and a CLS 500 V8 engine, and also a couple of diesels. And later on, the CLS 55 AMG was added, and it was AMG's turn with the CLS series. So what they did was they took the engine out of an E55 CL55 and or basically an E55, some small minor like the quad exhaust, a little bit more aggressive front, bigger alloy, 8 pistons, 360 millimeters front brake pads as well. And voila, you get this piece of beauty. When it was launched, the stock was 470 horsepower and 700 Newton meter, and it was a competitor to the BMW M5, but it was much heavier than the M5 and actually did not have an advanced gearbox as an M5. But to compare those two is quite different. Now comparing this one to an E55, this chassis is I think 35% more rigid than the E-Class. They have given the steering a little bit more weight. And that's pretty much it, but it's a little bit stiffer and it feels a little bit different than the E55, and I think it looks much more better than the E55. I mean, the E55 doesn't look as good as this one, and the E55 was not as limited as this one. In Sweden there are only about 70 of these cars ever registered, and many of them have been crashed and so on and so forth. And we're going to do a complete in-depth review of this car today, and we're also going to make another separate video on how to tune them, because there is a lot of misconception with the M113K engine. So this is what we're going to do here on Auto Corner today. So here we are behind the wheel of this beautiful, magnificent car. Now let's hear that engine first of all. Let's see how it sounds. Actually is very fast, I would say, even by today's standard. So original it's 470 horsepower and 700 Newton meters, which is a totally different character to the M5, but a little bit later on that. Now the thing is, when you step inside of these CLS first generation, you realize that the interior is a little bit different than the E-Class. So this is basically the same, but this entire layout is totally different. The steering wheel is of course the same, and everything like that is the same, but it's a little bit different. And here we have a tunnel. Now we will open the rear. Yeah, I love that characteristic of that car. It sounds so fucking good. But yeah, that's the thing that's a little bit different in here compared to the E-Class, the E55. Now, like I said, CLS, you have a variety of different engines, but this was the top of the range back in 04-05. Later on, this was replaced by the CLS 63 AMG. We got a much improved gearbox. Now, the reason why this car, the 55 models, did not get that gearbox was actually that the car was too powerful. It had too much torque, so the gearbox basically could not handle it. It will break the gearbox in part. But the 63s have more power high up, and low, not as much torque. It's a totally different engine, and I think the 55 engine fits this car much better, because it's the torque you want, because you don't use the power all the time, but the torque is that thing that you really want to use. And that's so special to have that amount of torque, and the torque is very low down in the rev range as well. But to drive, it is actually a little bit sharper than the E-Class, and it feels sharper. The steering is exactly the same. They say it's a little bit more heavy. I don't know how much, but it's not a big difference. But overall, to drive is magnificent, and the CLS 55 AMG is just better in every single way than the normal CLSs. The chassis is very well composed. The suspension is, even in the hardest suspension settings, is actually very smooth and very nice. Even when I'm riding on 19-inch rims, it feels really well. But the thing is, when you're really driving it hard, the suspension is not as sharp or as stiff as the BMW M5. So you feel when you start to turn, it has that initial roll, but then after that it really grips quite well. But it's quite a soft car. Even now when I'm in the sportiest setting, yes, I'm being bounced around a little bit, but it's not that bad compared to other cars. Now, the main difference between this and an M5 is, of course, the entire characteristics of the car. The M5 has much more of a sporty feel, while the CLS is a little bit more relaxed feel. But when you use the power, it's fucking fast. It's really bad roads here. You can get up in quite a lot of troubles. The brakes are unbelievable. Actually, the calipers are the same as the SLR McLaren, which is the Mercedes supercar back in the days, which is really cool. The only difference is that thing has carbon brakes. Well, this car does not have that. But this car fits much on open roads and on highways. Here's where this car shines. On a small road, you really feel the weight of the car. It's a very heavy car, so you feel that. Now I'll do a separate video on tuning these cars, because this car is of course tuned. It's not stock. It has basically 550 horsepower with some small modifications. But what a lot of people do is they tune the shit out of them, putting smarter pulleys and stuff like that, which really does not affect the performance that much. But makes the car really unreliable, and a lot of people actually break these cars. So the M113K engine is actually quite a sort of after engine, because they're very hard to find because so many people blow them up. But I love this car. It's such a special thing to drive. The steering is not as sharp as the modern day cars, you really feel that, and the gearbox, which is the biggest thing when it comes to the 55s. I mean, it's a full second delay maybe when shifting gears, but you get used to it and you can drive the car in that way. We also have some cool option that you have to check out for is the keyless go system, which is really handy dandy, which means you can have the key in your pocket and the car will start itself. But it's a beautiful button on the gearbox. Also adaptive cruise control, which this car doesn't have. Otherwise, you've seen that. Heated and cooled seats. Now I did it in the wrong way, but you understand what I mean. Which is a really cool option, which I really like. Especially cooled seats is really handy in the summertime. And of course, the roof and the black Alcantara roof. But it's very hard to come by. But it's a very special car, and for the price you can get them. I mean, I've seen these cars as low as 14,000 euros, which is unbelievable. I even saw one this summer was sold for 13,000. Now that's a high mileage one that probably has a broken air suspension and so on. But let's say for 20 you're gonna get one that's been well maintained, and you won't have any problems. Now the thing to look after when buying a CLS 55 AMG, now with that I've owned one and done so many hours of research on them, the first thing you have to check is the owner history, of course, and everything like that has been maintained really religiously, because if you don't maintain these cars they will break, and they seem to come in very weird people's hands. But first check the service history, and all of that is going to be okay. The second thing you have to check that the air suspension works perfectly, check that the air pump for the air suspension has been changed, and the relay as well. That's a simple thing to do. Also check that the engine doesn't make any weird sounds or anything like that, but they usually don't. The SRS pump usually goes for the braking system. I think they can have, I don't know how many brakes, and many times you press the brake it holds, but then after that you have to replace them. So check that also that has been changed, otherwise you have to spend money on it. And that's pretty much it. Otherwise than that, and of course check that the air suspension works perfectly when you're lowering it, hiring it, when you're parking it, that you don't see that it's dropping. Other than that, this car is basically bulletproof. And when it comes to tuning, you have a video in the description that tells you a little bit more on how to tune these cars. And yeah, and I would say actually, if I had to choose between the W219 chassis CLS 55 or the CLS 63s, I would choose a CLS 55 every day of the week, because of this engine. It's a totally different characteristic of it, and I think I like this engine much more. The gearbox is of course better than the CLS 63s, but this engine is magnificent, and you can tune them very easily. And stock out of the box, the CLS is actually a little bit faster. The CLS 55 is a little bit faster to 60 than the CLS 63, funny enough. You get also better fuel economy with that with this car. And overall it's actually a little bit more reliable. That engine has problem with the camshafts that has to be replaced due to the angle of the camshafts. So I think also to maintain, this car is cheaper actually, and the fuel economy is better. Now we're driven like fucking assholes, you're doing 22.5 liters per 100, but if you drive it normally, I mean, I've even seen it under 10, which is really impressive for a car that's from 2005. I hope you like this video of the CLS 55. We have a lot more videos on this car and how I bought it, how the car actually broke when I bought it, because I bought it for a guy who was a tuner and had no idea what the fuck he was doing, and the car actually blew up on the way, but as you can see I fixed it. So you can see all of those videos in the description, and I will be enjoying myself because this is the last days I have this before the winter comes here in Sweden, and we will make a lot more videos. We have some winter cars that we bought that we're gonna drive the absolute shit off, so check that as well. So don't forget to subscribe to see those videos. Peace.